My fiancé had another woman in his heart. Because of her, Zachary postponed our wedding 3 times. When he received Dana's hysterical phone call again, Zachary ignored the staff who were arranging his groom's outfit for him and was about to walk out. I was sitting on the chair, wearing a spotless white wedding dress. Outside were our relatives and friends from both sides. This was supposed to be the happiest and most beautiful moment for me. I said in a calm tone, "If you leave this time, there won't be a next time for us." Hearing this, Zachary frowned. "Violet, I hate it when others threaten me the most. If you can't be understanding, then there's no need for us to get married." He slammed the door and left, leaving everyone present behind. After he coaxed Dana, who was threatening to commit suicide, it was a long, long time before he remembered me. He bought my favorite flowers and a necklace and came to my apartment to make up, but there was no one there. Because I was already dead, I dialed Zachary's number, but it was still busy after a long time. I called him using someone else's phone, but it couldn't get through either. Zachary's friend looked uncomfortable and hesitated for a long time before telling me the truth. I contacted Zachary in the morning. He said Dana called him and had been crying. It went without saying that everyone's expressions around changed immediately. Mom couldn't sit still anymore. She stood up and cursed loudly. "That damn Zachary. Does he really think there's no one in the Wen family?" I watched as my usually elegant mom had red eyes because of me and gently patted the back of her hand to comfort her. In the full-length mirror, I was wearing a wedding dress. The hem of the dress, studded with diamonds, trailed to the ground, shining like the Milky Way. At such a dignified and beautiful moment, there was just a missing groom by my side. The toasting dress had already been chosen. All that was left was to finalize the main wedding dress. Zachary, who had promised to always be with me, had disappeared. Looking at myself in the mirror, my eyes also became red. Mom couldn't bear it and said, "Zachary, he." I smiled and said, "Mom, Zachary will definitely come." Even though I said that, I clenched my hands behind my back, and my nails dug deeply into my flesh. By the time Zachary rushed over in a hurry, everyone had already left. When he came, his collar was a bit askew and his hairstyle was a bit messy. I put my hands on my knees and looked up at him. I was still wearing that thick and gorgeous wedding dress that was inconvenient for movement and made me feel stuffy in the chest. Because this wedding dress was my favorite one, and I wanted Zachary to see it. Sure enough, he was stunned when he saw it, and a look of amazement appeared in his eyes. "The third time," I said softly. "Zachary, this is the third time you've run away at the last minute." 3 times Zachary postponed our wedding for various reasons. The only common point was that it was all for Dana. She had a nightmare, she sprained her ankle, she suddenly had heart palpitations and was hospitalized. There were just too many reasons and excuses. Zachary squatted in front of me, grabbed my hands, and there was deep earnestness and apology in his eyes. "I'm sorry. Dana's situation was really bad." This time, I coaxed her for 3 hours before she fell asleep. I stared at Zachary's moving lips. His lower lip was chapped and a bit of bright red blood oozed out. Obviously, someone had bitten it in anger. Such an obvious flaw was shown in front of me, but Zachary didn't even bother to hide it. I lowered my eyelashes, and an endless sourness surged in my heart. "For next month's wedding, you must promise that you won't be called away by Dana. Otherwise, there won't be a next time for us." Zachary didn't understand what I meant by saying this. He just followed my words, rubbed his face against the back of my hand to show his obedience. He didn't notice that the veins on the back of my hand were obvious and that my hand was as thin as a branch. He was just eager to make a promise and eager to get my temporary forgiveness. Just like countless times before, "Okay, no matter what happens, I won't leave." We hastily finalized the wedding dress. When I got home, I took off the long dress, and the clothes were scattered on the wooden floor. Looking at myself in the mirror, I examined myself. My ribs were protruding and seemed a bit outward, and my limbs were so thin that they looked like they could be broken by a gust of wind. I picked up a makeup remover cotton pad and removed the eye makeup first. The heavy dark circles under my eyes revealed the exhaustion and decline that came from within, like a rose that was about to wither and die. Looking at myself getting thinner day by day in the mirror, I always spent a lot of time trying to hide these. But Zachary couldn't tell, could he? 3 months ago, something strange happened to my body. I felt nauseous in my stomach and couldn't fall asleep all night long. At first, I thought it was due to endocrine disorders caused by being too busy at work until I got the physical examination report. It was terminal stomach cancer. When I got this result, after the initial shock, there was an unexpected calmness. Because my father died of this disease. Mom hugged me and cried bitterly, which made me at a loss. I couldn't wipe away her tears no matter how hard I tried, especially when I carefully told Mom about several bank cards and their passwords respectively. She was choked with sobs. After hesitating and thinking for a long time, I said to Mom, "Mom, I have a wish. I want to get married." 04 Zachary proposed to me in a high-end restaurant. While having dinner, I caught a glimpse of a man at the next table putting a ring on his female companion's finger. Unconsciously, I kept looking over there and my eyes were full of envy. Envious? Zachary asked me with a smile on his lips. I shook my head and pretended not to care as I lowered my head to eat the dessert. Suddenly, the fork touched something strange. My heart skipped a beat. I took the thing out of the cake. After wiping it clean, it turned out to be a brand new ring. Zachary then got down on one knee, took a big bouquet of blooming red roses prepared by the waiter. Will you marry me, Violet? The ring reflected the light under the lamp, and my initials were engraved on the inside. Zachary had a smile in his eyes, and only my reflection was in his eyes. At this moment, it was as if I was hit by the stars flying towards me. I didn't hesitate and nodded eagerly. I put my arms around Zachary's neck and hugged him tightly. It felt like my heart was filled with happiness. Obviously, we were still so good back then. Obviously, I was still healthy back then. I was surrounded by happiness. But when did the change start? One day after the proposal, Zachary started to be absent-minded. Because Dana came back. It was from others that I found out who Dana was. She was Zachary's ex-girlfriend, the person who used to be on the top of Zachary's heart. To pursue Dana, Zachary, who was afraid of heights, even went bungee jumping and skydiving, doing many things that exceeded his limits. But later Dana chose someone else, followed that person abroad, and abandoned Zachary. Because of this, Zachary was depressed for quite a while. Until he met me later. Dana's choice wasn't right. The person she chose brought her a huge shadow. After experiencing that relationship, Dana became anxious, irritable, and suffered from severe depression. She lost her job and lived on the financial support of her parents. And her only obsession was to contact Zachary frequently. Obviously, Zachary wasn't interested in her. On the contrary, he had a strong sense of disgust towards her. He blocked her phone number. When he was really annoyed, he directly answered the phone and shouted, "Go see a doctor if you're sick. I can't cure you." I quietly watched the furious him. After hanging up the phone, there was deep tiredness between Zachary's eyebrows. But when he saw me, he put on a smile again, took me into his arms, and kissed me on the lips. That night, he was wild and rough, constantly calling my name, with a hint of venting in it. I didn't think much about it at that time, until Dana came to find him in person. She opened her arms to block our car. Her thin and slender body was only wearing a white thin dress, shivering in the cold wind. After we got out of the car, she had tears in her eyes, looked at me tremblingly, stretched out her arm towards me, revealing the deep and shallow, dense scars on her wrist. She said in a sobbing tone, "Sister Violet, I know you two are already together and are about to get married. But I'm really in so much pain. I just don't know what to do." She was looking at me, but out of the corner of her eye, she kept glancing at Zachary, who was standing beside with a cold face and didn't say a word. Sure enough, Zachary immediately grabbed Dana's wrist when he heard this. "Are you crazy? Why did you hurt yourself like this?" I looked at Dana's face. She was pale, and the most prominent feature on her small face was her teary eyes. How could Zachary not feel the urge to protect such a person? Zachary's face was still gloomy, but there was a bit of imperceptible heartache added to it. He looked at Dana's shivering shoulders, took off his suit jacket, and put it on Dana. He then looked down at Dana's feet. Her fair feet were bare, and even the heels were chapped, with a bit of bright red blood oozing out. Zachary frowned and asked, "Did you run out directly? You'll get sick like this. I'll take you home." When he said this, he obviously ignored me beside him. I said, "Zachary, I'm going to be late for work." Zachary hesitated, but in the end, Dana got into Zachary's car on the grounds that she was about to have low blood sugar. She took the passenger seat that should have been mine. They drove away. 07 Thinking about it now, the change in Zachary's attitude towards me also started from that time. He began to be absent-minded, would stare at the turned-off phone screen in a daze or smile foolishly, just like a silly boy who was young and in love. Once when I leaned over to kiss him, he subconsciously turned his head away. Then, in my stunned eyes, he rubbed his forehead and said that he was too tired recently. At first, I thought it was because he was too tired from running the company and couldn't divide his attention. Until he spent less and less time with me. I caught him red-handed. He said he was going to the company to handle documents, but it turned out that he went to find Dana. He became more and more patient with Dana, but on the contrary, he became colder and colder towards me. His feelings for Dana were like an iceberg that was gradually melting, revealing the dusty love that had been covered up before. Zachary and I met at work. At that time, he was calm, wise, and did things in an orderly manner. He gave me a lot of help. I had never seen him so impulsive and unrestrained before. 08 I also wanted to have a good talk with Zachary once. I sat on the sofa waiting for him to come back until 12 o'clock at midnight. The moment he turned on the living room light, our eyes met. A guilty look flashed across his face. "Still not asleep? Did you go to accompany Dana again?" Dana didn't want to take medicine, so I had to spend a lot of effort to coax her to take it every time. She's such a grown-up but still acts like a child. He shook his head, and an unconscious smile appeared on his face. Even though he was tired all over, he was still happy. After arguing with him many times because of Dana, now when mentioning Dana, Zachary didn't hide it like he did at the beginning. I asked him, "Then do you still remember that today is the 5th anniversary of our relationship?" I remembered that Zachary's face went blank for a moment. What did he say in the end? He said that Dana came to the city for him, had no relatives here, and had psychological problems. He couldn't just ignore her, but he still didn't answer me whether he remembered our anniversary or not. 09 After learning that I had an incurable disease. In fact, I wasn't as calm as I seemed on the surface. Zachary couldn't just stand by when it came to Dana. I could understand that at first. When Zachary was 10 years old, after school one day, he took his math test paper with a full score home, hoping to get praise from his mother. But when he got home, he only saw his mother, who suffered from depression, hanging herself. This incident had always been a nightmare that haunted Zachary. Once when my phone ran out of battery and couldn't be reached by phone, as the president of the company, he started to insist on picking me up and sending me to work every day in person. At first, I didn't know about this. Looking at his nervous and oversensitive look, I just thought it was funny and joked to scare him. I might not come back one day. Maybe I broke up with you. Zachary's reaction at that time was unexpected to me. Emotions surged in his eyes. He stared at me without blinking, suddenly lowered his head and kissed me, with such force that it was almost as if he wanted to swallow me whole. Zachary had always been calm and self-controlled, and rarely showed his emotions like this. He didn't let go of me until he tasted the blood from the bite on my lips. His eyes were red all around, and he murmured, "You can't leave me. Never leave me." There was deep vulnerability in his words. I had never seen Zachary like this before. Since then, I never easily said anything about leaving him again. But the matter of having cancer was too big, so big that it almost broke me down. After hesitating again and again, I still planned to tell Zachary. After 5 years of being in a relationship, Zachary and I were so close that we were almost like one person. I had become habitually dependent on Zachary. For a while, I naively thought that there was nothing between us that couldn't be said or faced together. Seeing that I hesitated to speak, he thought I was going to argue with him about Dana's matter again. He frowned slightly and said impatiently, "I'm very tired. Deal with whatever it is by yourself first." I was stunned. He used to care about every little thing of mine, but now all that was left was perfunctory evasion. Only then did I notice that we talked less and less. I was silent for a while and said, "Okay." 10 I woke up in bed. Only then did I realize that I had just had a dream about the past. The bed beside me was empty. I got out of bed barefoot, and the cold floor made me shiver. Through the gauze curtain blown by the wind, I saw Zachary leaning against the balcony railing and smoking. The scarlet sparks were particularly conspicuous on this cold and heartless night. I walked over and put my arms around Zachary's waist. He stiffened and subconsciously tensed the muscles in his back. Then he directly turned off his phone screen. Actually, he didn't need to. I had already seen it. On Zachary's phone screen, he was searching on Baidu, how to make a depressed patient happy. How to heal a woman who has suffered from verbal violence. There were over a dozen similar search records below. I let out a deep breath and said softly, "I've seen it all." Zachary turned around, stared at me with his deep eyes, a bit helplessly. "Violet, Dana's situation is very bad. As healthy people, these are the only things we can do for her." Healthy people, I curled my lips sarcastically. But why does it have to be you? Doesn't she have relatives or friends in other cities? Why does it have to be you, a person who is about to get married? Violet. Zachary raised his voice unhappily. This was a sign that he was about to get angry. She's different from you. Her mental state is unstable, and her life has been messed up by that man. She really needs me. I looked up and asked Zachary, if I were sick, even more seriously than her, what would you do? He frowned tightly and his face darkened. Is it interesting to compare you with Dana? Can't you stop being so childish? If one day, Before I could finish my words, Zachary's phone rang. In less than a second, he picked it up. Dana's voice came from the other end of the phone. Her voice was shrill, so loud that I beside him could also hear it clearly. There was even the sound of broken dishes. She was sobbing, sounding sensitive and helpless, and said, "Zachary. I dreamed that everyone abandoned me. I dreamed about the day we broke up, and even you didn't want me. I'm so scared. Do you think it's true? Don't be afraid. It's not true. I'll come to accompany you." After hearing this, Zachary subconsciously grabbed his coat and rushed out the door. But then he remembered that I was still beside him. "Can you not go?" I grabbed Zachary's arm. Zachary turned his head and looked at me disappointedly. "Violet, can't you be a bit more understanding? I've already promised that I will definitely marry you. What are you still worried about?" I fell silent and let go of Zachary's hand. Once upon a time, we had become like this. The deep disappointment in my eyes could no longer hurt Zachary. He didn't look back and walked away quickly after putting on his coat. The door was slammed shut loudly. Just like countless times before, I felt sick in my stomach involuntarily. I covered my mouth and rushed to the toilet to vomit. Looking at the brown liquid flowing in the wash basin, I smiled. Because of the vomiting, my eyes were full of bloodshot in the mirror, and physiological tears overflowed from the corners of my eyes. Zachary didn't know that the doctor said my condition had deteriorated seriously and that I didn't have much time left. Zachary said that he pitied Dana because she was tortured by mental illness. What about me? 11. My broken body didn't allow me to stay awake until the second half of the night, but a message woke me up when I was half asleep. A stranger added me 2 days ago, but didn't say a word after I accepted the request. Only now did I know that the owner of this account was Dana. Suddenly, she started sending me messages one after another. Your fiancé came to accompany me. Don't you think you're so pitiful? She sent me several pictures out of a mean sense of fun. Zachary knew that I was so sad that I didn't eat, so he specially cooked millet porridge for my health. It's so late now, and he still ran out to buy the duck necks that I like. He went to several streets. Well, now he's so tired that he's sleeping beside me. Immediately after that, she sent a video. In the video, Dana was playfully playing with Zachary's long, fair fingers, and Zachary just murmured, "Stop it." I hadn't heard such a tone of indulgence for a long time. Don't worry. We didn't do anything. Zachary cherishes me so much that he can't bear to touch me at all. Suddenly, I began to wonder whether Dana was really like what Zachary said. Would a depressed patient really deliberately provoke me like she did? If he really cherishes you, he won't let you be a mistress. It seemed that Dana was stimulated by my words. The status of typing in the chat box appeared and disappeared, and then appeared again. She thought for a long time but couldn't come up with powerful words to fight back against me. Yes. Zachary hadn't thought about breaking up with me, but he also couldn't let Dana go. Being indecisive was his biggest contradiction. Finally, a message came from the other side. I heard that you're going to hold your wedding next month. Then I won't let your wedding happen. Her demonstration was ridiculous, but it used to be what I was most afraid of. Once, Zachary resolutely resigned to start his own company because he was dissatisfied with the treatment in the company. Without saying much, I resigned and fought side by side with him. Later, when the company became stable and there was no place for me to play my role in the company, I went to find a job in another company. It was also after that Zachary had a sense of crisis and proposed to me. I used to think that we were not only partners but also bosom friends. I really wanted to be with Zachary until the end. But after getting cancer, I hadn't figured out how to say goodbye to Zachary. The only remaining wish was to put on the wedding dress and fulfill my long-cherished wish. And the only person who could fulfill this with me was Zachary. Looking at Dana's triumphant tone, this thing that I used to be most afraid of suddenly disappeared from my heart. I suddenly realized that I didn't love Zachary anymore. I replied to Dana, "Do as you like." Then, I turned off my phone and threw it casually on the bed. I pulled open the curtain with a jerk. At the moment when I pulled it open, the whitening sky appeared, and a ray of light from the morning glow shone in and fell on me. Full of vitality, I stared fixedly at the green mountain in the distance and thought, even without the groom, I will complete that wedding alone. On the wedding day, this still happened. I was wearing a floor-length wedding dress, and the staff was doing my makeup. Zachary was still holding my hand to comfort my nervousness, but after answering the phone, his expression changed drastically. He stood up anxiously. Dana's nanny said that she suddenly started crying and making a fuss, and even cut herself with a blade, saying that she didn't want to live and was going to jump off the building. There was full of worry between Zachary's eyebrows. This worry made him forget for a moment that it was our wedding. I pulled the corners of my mouth and looked up at him with complicated eyes. Have you ever thought that she did it on purpose? Why is it always so coincidental right on our wedding day? My voice was very soft, but it accurately hit Zachary's nerve. His face darkened, and he looked at me with a blaming look as if he didn't know me. Violet, I thought you were understanding and wouldn't ignore other people's lives. But this is my wedding. But Dana will die if I don't go. Zachary roared and rudely interrupted me. His voice made all the staff who were making various preparations stop and look at him in disbelief. Outside were all our relatives and friends, waiting happily for our appearance. I raised my eyes. Even though I was reluctant, I could only lower my head and beg Zachary, all the people outside are those we know. Don't make me embarrassed alone, okay? Zachary's frown loosened a little, and he seemed a bit hesitant. But a phone call came in. What? Tell her not to move. I'll come right away. Zachary replied to the person on the other end of the phone, and his voice was obviously full of anxiety and nervousness. Obviously, Dana had made some extreme move again. In fact, Dana's tricks were very clumsy, just things like climbing onto the balcony and threatening to jump off the building. But this was enough to make Zachary completely forget my existence. His throat tightened, and he was about to step out. Zachary! I shouted to stop him. His hand was on the doorknob, and he stopped. I tried my best to keep my voice calm. If you leave this time, there really won't be a next time for us. Zachary frowned tightly. He couldn't wait to go to Dana. This worry made him ignore the vulnerability and trembling in my words. Even though I had already made up my mind not to love Zachary anymore, I still hoped that he could make an exception for me just this once. At least, don't make me look so embarrassed. But Zachary's answer in the next second made me feel like I had fallen into an ice cellar. Violet, I hate it when others threaten me the most. If you can't be understanding, then there's no need for us to get married. His words were heard by Sean, who pushed the door open. He was a friend of both Zachary and me. He also knew about my illness. He immediately understood the whole story and opened his eyes wide in disbelief. You're leaving? Are you waiting for everyone outside to laugh at Dana? Sean punched Zachary hard in the face, trying to make him come to his senses. Zachary wasn't the kind of person who would just take a beating. He was about to fight back immediately. Sean. I stopped Sean, and my voice was filled with bottomless tiredness. Forget it. Let him go. But you? Sean couldn't bear it. He turned around and questioned Zachary. Do you know that Violet, what? Are you going to say that her situation is worse than Dana's? Zachary then let out a disdainful sneer. This sneer made Sean clench his fist even tighter and also made my heart completely die. I shook my head and said to Sean, forget it. It's not necessary. The abnormality of this sentence made Zachary frown. But Dana had already occupied his mind, and he still walked away. The door was slammed shut suddenly, leaving everyone looking at each other in astonishment. Violet? Sean looked at me worriedly. I gave a bright smile and stood up unsteadily. It's okay. I'm also the main character of the wedding, right? I walked out, avoiding others' support. I pushed open the door leading to the wedding venue. Suddenly, a drop of blood fell down and splashed on my white wedding dress, which was particularly conspicuous. 1 drop, 2 drops, 3 drops. The excruciating pain spread throughout my body at this moment. My body went limp and I fell down. The white wedding dress was still stained by me in the end. Violet, Violet. The guests all stood up from their seats, looking shocked and panicked on their faces. They rushed towards me one after another. This was the last scene I saw before losing consciousness. 13 When I woke up, my nose was filled with the pungent smell of disinfectant. I thought I was really dead. Violet, you're awake? Sean's surprised voice came to my ears. Looking up, Sean, Mom, and friends all gathered around, looking at me eagerly. But Zachary wasn't around. Where's Zachary? My voice was extremely hoarse, perhaps because of the long sleep. They all looked uncomfortable and hesitated to speak. 14 The call couldn't get through. He should have gone to find Dana. Zachary had always thought that I was very strong. While Dana was different from me. She couldn't take care of herself and liked to cry and make a fuss. This was the reason why he blatantly abandoned me every time. I wasn't surprised to get this answer. There was neither loss nor sadness in my heart. Maybe when you've been disappointed too many times, you won't be disappointed anymore. But Sean was different. He angrily held his phone and dialed Zachary's number again and again. Why is he so calm while you're suffering here? A big man who was 1.83 meters tall had his eyes red because of me. After many days, Zachary's phone was finally dialed through. Sean, Violet hasn't come back for many days. Where did she go? Couldn't she stop being so willful and disappear without a word? Zachary's voice was calm, impatient, and even complaining that I was being unreasonable. Sean suppressed his anger and said, How dare you ask about Violet? Violet is dead. Don't joke. It's not funny. Through the screen, I could imagine Zachary's reaction. Probably he sneered, didn't believe it, and thought that Sean and I were teaming up to deceive him. Sean curled his lips sarcastically. You keep saying that your ex-girlfriend has severe depression and needs your company, but do you know that Dana has terminal stomach cancer? It's an incurable disease. Impossible, impossible. Zachary's voice on the phone was full of disbelief. Of course you think it's impossible. In your eyes, only your poor ex-girlfriend will die, and everyone else is immortal and can't die. Sean didn't want to talk to him anymore and hung up the phone directly. 15 I knew that Sean just wanted to vent his anger for me. I quietly listened to Sean retelling it to me. Hearing that Zachary had been like a trapped beast these days. He simply didn't believe the news of my death. He bought flowers and a necklace and went to the apartment I bought to make up, but was told by the security guard of the property management that I hadn't been back for a long time. He went to my company, but didn't know that I had already submitted my resignation letter and officially left the job not long ago, just before our wedding. When Zachary called my mom, she was beside me peeling an apple for me. Sean had already told Mom about it, and she also wanted to vent her anger for me. Her admission seemed to completely crush Zachary. I was surprised when I learned that Zachary had done something stupid for me. Zachary swallowed a whole bottle of sleeping pills. Ryan found it in time and sent him to the hospital. 16 When Zachary in hospital gown stood in front of me, it felt like a lifetime had passed. He had lost a lot of weight, was unshaven, and his cheekbones became more prominent. He had no vitality at all. And I wasn't in a better condition either. After the news of having cancer couldn't be hidden anymore, to comfort mom and friends, I still decided to follow the doctor's advice and have chemotherapy. I looked ugly after rounds of chemotherapy. My hair was gone, and the paleness that I used to cover up could no longer be hidden. I used to care a lot about my appearance and always maintained my image in front of Zachary. Now, seeing him standing in front of me with a shocked expression on his face, I felt that it was unnecessary. Zachary staggered to me and bent down to kneel in front of me. His once arrogant back seemed to be completely broken at this moment. He held my hand and put it against the back of his hand. Violet, they all said you were dead. I've been looking for you for many days but couldn't find you. If Ryan hadn't let it slip, and I came here to look for the hospitalization list, I would have thought you were really dead. His tears seemed to flow endlessly, but he held my hand tightly as if it was a precious treasure that he had regained. I gave a gentle smile and said with a pale and haggard face, I thought you wouldn't think of me anymore. Zachary raised his head to look at me, his face as pale as a sheet. As if to make up for it, he quickly took out a necklace from his arms. Didn't you like this necklace the most before? He held the necklace in his hands and wanted to put it on me. But I avoided it. Things that I liked before, even if I got them again now, didn't bring the same feeling as before. Coincidentally, I don't have much time left. You can be with Dana now. With every word I said, Zachary's face became even paler. Only when Violet was completely removed from his life did he feel the heart-piercing pain. It was his own fault. After realizing this, Zachary drank day and night, making himself look like a ghost. He was in a trance, just endlessly looking through the photo albums of their past. The photo of Violet holding a cake with a big smile on her face after getting promoted in the first company. On their first date, Violet was wearing a purple floral dress with a fishtail braid and rosy cheeks. On the day Violet agreed to his proposal, their hands were tightly held together, inseparable. They smiled at each other, just thinking about being together forever. The more he looked at them, the more painful his heart became. In the end, he was already numb, and there was only an unfillable void left in his heart. People around him all scolded Zachary as a scumbag. What were you doing earlier? Now you're pretending to be deep here. I even feel disgusted. You didn't treat her well when she was alive. Now that she's dead, you know you're regretful? It's too late. Even at Violet's funeral, he was refused entry by Violet's mother. Violet's body was cremated, and he didn't even know where her ashes were placed. He wasn't qualified to know these things. Only then did he find out that he wasn't even her husband. The company's performance plummeted. He had no heart to manage the company and wanted to donate more than half of it to charity organizations. When Dana heard this news, she came to find him. She was overjoyed with a smile on her brows. She smiled and advised Zachary not to sell the company. She said, didn't Violet deserve to die? Now that she's dead, no one will stand in our way. She just kept smiling as if she had won 50 million in the lottery. But she didn't notice Zachary's increasingly gloomy eyes at all. Zachary reached out and grabbed Dana's neck viciously. If the nanny sent by his father to watch over him hadn't noticed something was wrong and called the police, Dana might really have died. But her throat was seriously damaged, and it was already very difficult for her to speak complete sentences. Zachary began to investigate Dana's past crazily, and only then did he know that Dana had shown off to her best friend more than once that she would be able to kick Violet out and become Mrs. Zachary sooner or later. Her past was also fabricated. Dana coveted her ex-boyfriend's property. She got pregnant before marriage but was driven away by her ex-boyfriend's mother when the pregnancy didn't work out. Her illness was also fake. She was just counting on Zachary's soft heart. Even until Violet was dying, Dana was still provoking Violet. Zachary looked at a stack of ironclad evidence in black and white, and his fingertips trembled so much that he couldn't hold them. He was plunged into a huge self-blame that was about to overwhelm him. He was sorry to Violet. Even in the final stage of Violet's fading life, he hadn't been worthy of her. The only thing he could do was to transfer all his property, except for what was donated to charity organizations, to Violet's mother. Then he blocked Dana, who had just been discharged from the hospital, and drove towards the sea with her. Dana screamed with her damaged throat and panicked as she tried to grab the steering wheel but found that she couldn't move. Her limbs were tied up by Zachary. Zachary's eyes were red with madness. We both have to atone for our sins, don't we? He stepped on the accelerator. When the car plunged into the sea and was submerged by the seawater, Zachary seemed to see Violet's gentle face with bright and kind eyes when they first met. She had curved eyebrows and soft yet powerful eyes. She reached out her hand to him. Hello, I'm Violet. Hello. Forget it. In the next life, she'd better not meet him again. She thought to herself.